What is going on, everybody? Welcome in the North End Podcast, episode 115. My name is Zach Graham, your host here in the North End, joined, as always, by my good buddy. He's on record as my best friend. His name is Ian Michaud, and we call him E. Sitting here Wednesday afternoon, gloomy, rainy, Austin, Texas. Haven't seen you for about a week. How you feeling, man?
I'm doing well. I'm not going to let this weather get me down when we have all this exciting Austin FC stuff swirling, going around. We have preseason games to chat. We have interesting tidbits. I know that the Crumb feast has been large and bountiful thus far this offseason, and the detective work that you've been putting in always brings a smile to my face. I know you were comparing kneecaps earlier today, trying to make sure that you correctly identified the right human being by their kneecap. So I'm doing well, man. I got this new office chair here, courtesy of my mom, and I'm feeling pretty high up. I got the chair all the way down, but I feel like I'm looking down on you, and that seems right.
Yeah, well, I don't have much to say about that, but maybe I'll just raise my own chair up here.
All right.
What do you think about that? Like you mentioned, plenty to discuss here. The team getting I think a little light training in this morning, coming off the first preseason exhibition of the slate on Tuesday night out there in Florida. Let's jump back to start today's episode all the way back to last Thursday, because that was our first media availability for Coach Wolff and what ended up being Sebastian Driussi out there at the Performance Center. So just wanting to go back, obviously that was, 12 hours after we finished last week's episode. Classic. So discussing kind of what came out of that availability. Josh said there were 14 field players, which had me scratching my head because I counted 16 field players in camp that are on the first team, and that's not even including Micah Burton, who we did get some information on. Also, Guilherme Biru, obviously not here yet. So there are 18 signed right now on that first team roster. So at the time, my note was maybe he's not including guys like John Kolmanich, guys who are coming off injury and the like. He did say about Micah that Micah was still kind of getting fit after taking a knock back in the U17 World Cup in the fall. And all that talk kind of led to some fans, whether you're on social media, whether you're on Slack, what have you. I saw a lot of fans worrying about, man, we are just so screwed with the depth. We're going to have to be relying on FC2 players because there's like 6 to 8 of them in camp. And I think I just wanted to make this point right off the top, and we've gotten a little bit more, there's been more light shed on that over the last 6 days since Josh was talking about this. But as long as Biru arrives and they sign that 18th senior roster spot, which we think they do have to do by rule before the first game, I think there are probably 0 FC2 players active on match day 1 for the first team, because here, if you stick with me here through this list, then I'll let you give some feedback here. Just hypothetically, starting a lineup of Zardes, Rigoni, Obrian, Driussi, Danny, Ring, Kolmanich, Julio, Leo, and Gallagher, with a bench 9 of Hedges, Owen, Valencia, Finley, Fodre, Biru, spot 18, Hector, and Stephen Cleveland. Obviously, you could, if Kolmanich isn't ready, swap somebody else in there, what have you. But that's 20 first-team guys with no FC2 in sight. So, man, again, we're knocking on wood. We stay healthy throughout the next 5 weeks or 4 weeks now. But, yeah, I'm not worried about that at all. I am still worried, of course, about the first team's depth overall. But, in terms of those holes having to be plugged early in the season by FC2 players, I don't see it at the moment.
I don't think that's happening. I know that we're thin right now, and we need to have enough bodies for 11s in camp. That's my perception from what Josh has said, from the roster construction right now. We need to be able to run full games with these guys, and getting the FC2 guys up there, being able to get into that atmosphere, playing with the first team players, I think is a good thing. In the respect of good development for them. Obviously, if we were trying to rely on those guys to like be ready for match day 1 versus Minnesota, I don't think that's the case, and I don't think that would be a good thing. But we're just at the spot where it's like, like we had the rumors swirling last time with Miguel there, and trying to figure out where this other 9 is coming from. So I know we're being cautious with a lot of these players, as we should be, because we suffered some terrible injuries last year, and we're obviously pretty thin right now. But you're not going to see these FC2 guys on game day roster come first game here. No chance.
Yeah. Unless something crazy happens where there's multiple injuries and we legitimately don't bring in anybody else. And we can talk about
said no chance. There's a chance. Sure. It would be
very, very slim
situation. Yes.
Right. I got some positive things that came out of this first media availability last week. Josh said, it's good to see the majority of guys have come in a much better condition than last year. Not that it was poor, but there's been a lot of work this offseason. And then he specifically called out CJ for making physical strides this offseason. And that's just, we know about last year where, like, obviously the main focus in the preseason was on Romagna and his injury and lack of fitness. But, like, Diego, at times, he was called out by Josh, right? That kind of started that whole fracas, at least publicly, right? We know Maxi was getting limited minutes because he wasn't fully fit. Alex as well, back last January. And so to hear that with, a guy like Alex back in camp, and we know how much of a professional he is, whatever went on last offseason, it really feels like, and now we've got some confirmation from the head coach that these guys, when you go through a season like that, with the abuse that you take from a locked in, passionate, emotional fan base, you don't sit on your ass during the off-season months, right? And it sounds like these guys have come in at least a step ahead of where they were last year.
It sounds like they're hungry, and I think it is interesting that Josh specifically called out CJ there, because you look at the season we had in 2022, and there could be a bit of a hangover from such a successful season. You're kind of, resting on your laurels after a very successful season, probably enjoying your off season to, however you want to enjoy it. But it seemed that there's a hunger coming into this season. There's definitely some drive to, like, prove some people wrong. Like you said, I can't remember what commentator said we're wooden spoon candidate, but, like, that stuff starts
Matt
swirling.
Doyle.
Like that stuff starts swirling around, and it's like nobody wants to hear that. So it does seem like we're locked in and hungry. CJ was dealing with an injury at the beginning of last season. Yeah, like that was part of I think his fitness level. Also the jump, like it's a jump coming from San Diego State and where he was to get to MLS level of play. So very encouraging to hear that about CJ. Not dealing with the Romani distraction is fantastic. But it does sound like there's some hunger and there's some drive here, and that's a really good thing. And I hope that we're able to, like, ride that.
So here was the big eyebrow raiser out of that, 15 minutes or however long Josh was in front of the microphones. He was asked pretty directly, like, yes or no question, is Sebastian Driussi still the captain of this team? Here's what he said. He said, I think we have a lot of leaders inside the team. So I think that's a big part of this. I don't think there's one leader on our squad. It's by committee. And again, we'll work through preseason the same way we always do. I don't think there's been a big emphasis on stressing who a captain is at this point. But, there's plenty of experience in there. So to me, number 10 could still end up wearing the armband this season. But it's clearly undecided, because if it was decided, the answer is just yes. Of course he is, right? Yeah. So do you have any thoughts there, like on potentially that armband moving, whether it's back to Alex Ring or to somebody else out there that's a mainstay in the lineup? What do you think about this? Because I didn't expect that.
I mean, we chatted about it briefly in between texts where we're yelling at one another. But, I don't think we're ever going to get the full story with what happened last year with the armband. Obviously, things started to play out during the season. You saw the automatic trigger happen for Alex at the end of the year. Now, did that come into play initially with the decision to change the captain's band to 10? And It may have, it may not have. I don't have any sort of information on that. Again, I don't know if we'll ever get the full story. What I can say is that it was a mistake by the coaching staff. And I don't think it all falls on them, because as a leader, as a player, Seba has to grow and develop that part of his game if he wants to be a captain 10,
right.
or excuse me, not a 10, a captain on a team, a successful club, you know. And if you're thrust into that position, and we know Seba does not particularly like dealing with media. He's not a very vocal guy. He's more reclusive, kind of like, you know, not shy per se, but like he keeps to himself.
It's kind of a lead by example, right? He's not super vocal.
Yes, which is great. And that's another form of leadership. You know what I mean? Like there's different types of leadership. You look at, you know, guys in the past in different sports, like your Tim Duncans, dudes. You know, I can relate to plenty of, you know, Austin FC guys who idolize him for great reasons. And he was not a very vocal guy. He went out there and he did his job and he did it extremely well. And that's a good way to lead. It didn't seem like that was translating, or that's what the team needed at that point in time. Like those Spurs teams, obviously there is not a direct comparison, but they were filled with veteran guys who, you know, knew their job, knew what they were supposed to do. We were a bit in flux. Like, there was things happening. There was players moving around. There was disgruntled players. You know, a friend of Seba, you know, was upset, like you talked about with the Diego stuff coming out early. So I think things were handled pretty poorly at the beginning of the season. I think that's fair criticism to the coaching staff and management. And to not have that be a direct yes definitely leads me to believe that this is something that they're still looking for. Do you go back to Alex? That seems a little weird. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I'm hoping that these dudes can put that in the past and be like, this is a new season. We're fresh. We're here, but everyone's human. You know, that could be sticking with Alex. So I'm not sure who we're going to see. Can you imagine the heads exploding if it was like Owen? So we'll see as that progresses. I'm not overly worried about that right now. I don't think that is like a priority for the team. And I think that Josh's answer was pretty appropriate. We're searching, we're looking, we have leaders, we have dudes with talent or leadership skills. In the presser that Josh just had, we'll get into that later, but that was a question that came up with Johnny about captainship. And he kind of evaded it like he does a defender out there on the pitch. So it'll come to. I think that last year with that, just mishap and mishandling, there's probably a little bit of trepidation in naming this captain and going forward with it. But I'm confident that it's going to come through and we'll be where we need to be.
I'm just sitting here enjoying you warming up your positivity around the Spurs franchise with, LeBron coming down south to South Texas next year. But yeah, and I'm with you on all that. But speaking of Seba, he was the other guy who was available to the press last Thursday. Really just kind of talked about his individual goals. And I liked hearing this. Individual goals of competing for the MVP, competing for the Golden Boot. And also, of course, clarifying while he's saying that those go along with his primary responsibility of doing his best to elevate the team to a place where they can contribute or compete for trophies in whatever competition they're in. And I guess the last thing I'll say for now on the captain's band, because we will talk about that later again, I think I would rather see somebody else wearing it this year, whether it's Alex or it's Brad or it's Julio, whoever, because I want Seba to be able to focus on being the best player, not just on this team, but in the league. And maybe if he's not that, like that top 5 realm where I think all of us think he can still be at the age that he's at, still in his physical prime here. So I like that he's focused on those types of lofty goals. But, I hope he's still just, relying on the building blocks that it takes to get there. It's the upcoming 9 months that we have, right? We're not just going to get 20 goals again right off the bat. I know he knows that, but it's all getting me excited.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very appropriate answer. Like those things go hand in hand. If this dude is at an MVP level and he's competing for the MVP trophy, then we're a good team. Like that's just, you're not going to win an MVP despite your stat. Like you can have all kinds of stats. If we're at the bottom of the table, nobody's voting for you. So I think that's great. And I do agree. I want him to be able to focus on winning us games and scoring goals, and then let whoever we have with the band on there deal with keeping dudes in line. complaining to the refs, being a coach on the field. Like that's part of being a captain is like you're an extension of the coach on the field. And with Seba, like it wasn't it. And that's fine. Like that's not a knock on Seba. Like that's absolutely fine. So I like the answer as well. And if he stays healthy, there's absolutely no reason why he is not in that MVP conversation doing what he does.
Right. Yeah. The wins have to come with that. And again, and if he is wearing the armband, we're right behind you, baby. But, it's just, there's multiple possibilities here now. So let's move ahead. The team went out to Florida, again, playing their first preseason match against Philly last night. They've got Cincinnati coming up this Friday. But before we dive into last night's match and the few takeaways we have from that, coming off the flight, you can look in the content that the team put out that most of those young guys look like they're there. Like we saw Jimmy, we saw new FC goalkeeper Marcus Alstrup there as well. We saw Sal, some of the other guys that we kind of expected, your Pinos and the like. Then we also see that the final mystery player that we had remaining in camp with the first team also there. So you mentioned that I was comparing like pictures of people's kneecaps and things like that. I was doing a lot of things that we're not going to dive into because, a magician never reveals his tricks. And the reality of it is I don't want to be so embarrassed. Like you guys don't know how much of a lunatic I am, but we figured it out Tuesday morning. Antonio Gomez is the final player in camp. Center back, 4-year center back out of Cal Baptist. Won the WAC tournament the last 2 years with Cal Baptist, was all tournament team his junior season. So it was nice to kind of get that. Now we've got all the names to the faces here in first team camp, at least until we add a couple trialists, which maybe we'll see when they get back home next week. So all those guys suited up against Philly last night. And so I guess the first thing, we had some warm-up crumbs, right? So if you're out there watching on Verde Hill in a couple of weeks, imagine these guys are still with the team then. Some of the numbers those guys were wearing. We had Bryant Jimmy Farquharson wearing 26. We had Sheikh Touré wearing 34. Sebastian Pinot, 35. Sal Mazzaferro was wearing 36. Antonio Gomez, the new guy, 39. And then Chris Garcia, who, of course, is on loan from El Paso, he was wearing 38. And as expected, the team replaced the entire 11 at halftime and had a balanced mixture of first-team returners, first-team new acquisitions, and FCTO guys in each lineup. Very, very similar to what we saw against Philly in Florida at this time last year. It was actually, I think, 2 days off from being an exact year to the day when we had our first preseason scrimmage last year. And last year you saw guys like Valentin Noel, Sofian Jafal, Hector Jimenez, Kip Keller, these guys that either played 0 first-team minutes, spent the majority of their time with FC2, or like Hector just played, I think double-digit minutes the entire season, at least in the league. So first 11 last night against Philly. You did have Stephen Cleveland get the start in the first half. In goal, your back four was Sheikh Touré, Matt Hedges, Antonio Gomez out there next to the ex-defensive player of the year in MLS, and Johnny G. Then you had Alex Ring and Owen Wolff in the defensive half, and the attack was Sebastian Pinot up top with CJ on the left, Ethan Finley on the right, and of course, number 10 in the middle. So there's not a ton to take away from games that aren't streamed and are just quote-unquote live blogged. Shout out to the Union for it. They're, of course, Philly-centric updates, but updates every couple of minutes.
Yes.
Austin FC. Although I will give our media content social team credit. I don't think last year we had any updates outside of some clips after any goals we scored last year. We did have a few more updates, including the actual lineups. We were piecing together the lineups last year from the few pictures that emerged. This side did get scored on. So it was 1-0 at the half. We actually do have a replay of that Philly goal. We don't need to watch it now. It was a pretty cheeky score by Julian Carranza, who did not play in their Phillies first game against Flamengo. So thought he was going to be out coming into the day, but he ended up playing the first 45. You had Quinn Sullivan there on the right. It looked like Czech Teray was playing on the left and Johnny G on the right in that alignment. And Teray was pretty clearly pushed up the field because there was no left back to be found. Alex Ring, Matt Hedges trying to close down on Sullivan. He puts a cross into the near post, and Carranza beat Gomez to the spot. And back heel, nutmeg through Cleveland's legs. It was a very, very preseason type of goal. Just it's the player personnel, the effort, what have you. I think watching the replay, maybe Matt Hedges gets a little slide there if the game matters. But once you see that goal or that highlight be posted, and was like, oh wow, it was a pretty nice goal.
Yeah. We're experimenting with guys here, experimenting with lineups, trying to find connections. Obviously, I think we're going to get into it a little bit more about some potential roster moves in regard to who we have and where they're playing later on in the episode here, just based on some detective work that we've picked up on from interviews with Josh and seeing the lineups that we have out there. I can't say for sure what Philly rolled out. Did you get their starting 11?
Yeah, they had their lineup. It was.
I'm assuming it's a blend of.
It was identical basically for both teams.
This is the alarm bells don't need to be going off, y'all. We're working with some of these FC2 guys. They're in the play. They're in the camp, and they're here. And it's preseason. We're building stuff. We're trying new things. We're looking at chemistry between players and things of that nature. So. You're going to see these guys playing in the preseason, but they're not coming up for Minnesota.
Yeah. That Philly 11 for the first half, I will say, was much more of a first-team starting caliber roster than Austin put out there. Andre Blake. Yeah, for sure. Andre Blake was in net. Backline, Harriel, Wagner, Lowe, Glesnes. Right? That's pretty damn good. Carranza up top. McGlynn and Sullivan were out there, and Jose Martinez as well, who did go down in the first 20 minutes and was subbed off. I imagine that was probably precautionary. I do think he had a knock last week as well. Looking at some Philly stuff coming into this game, trying to figure out what they had working. In the second half, lineup, again, new 11. So you had Brad in net there. Backline of Hector, Sal, Julio, and Alonso Ramirez, I think, was playing right back last night. We did see him play on the back line for FC minimally last year. It was usually, I think it was always a mid-game switch where, when I think Jackson Valti got that red card against Tacoma on the road, I think he slid back there. A couple other times. Mm-hmm. Then you had Johan and Danny. And then up top, I think Emi Rigoni was playing the striker here, with Val Noel playing the 10, Chris Garcia and Hodder Obrian on the wings. But again, we only have this clip of Danny's goal to level the scoring, and that was the final score, 1-1. But I would encourage, if you have not seen it yet, go watch Danny. Nice little goal there. Hector actually provided the assist, leading the break, finds Danny. Danny drops his defender, kind of breaks his ankles there and slots it home. So again, we'll talk a little bit maybe. We're maybe going to see some different positionality for Danny, maybe a little bit more advanced up the field. It is preseason, but trying different things, you never know what you can unlock. And Danny with the equalizer yesterday.
Look, we've been talking about versatility in regard to the players that we have and how we can move them around the field. I think you're going to see some experimentation with Danny moving up the pitch a little bit here. We know we're thin at striker. Our starting striker is Driussi. That's the fact. He's an older player. He suffered some injuries just based on breaking down and all the sort of miles he has on his legs right now. So we're going to have to get creative with these things. And you've seen the full back signings, the acquisitions we've had back there. That really frees up Johnny G pretty substantially. And he's somebody who we can kind of move around. Danny is somebody as well that we can move around. And I'm not going to be shocked to see these dudes in a more advanced position. And again, I know it's not everyone's favorite thing to hear, but Emmy showed flashes at the 9 last year where he looked better at the 9 than he did in other positions, which isn't saying a whole lot considering he wasn't producing at a huge level. But the instincts are there. Like the instincts for the play to be on the ball, like to be in the right position, and he can also distribute out of that position much better than Driussi can. Driussi gets it on his foot, the ball's directed to wherever the open player is, and then he's sprinting up the field trying to get into the box. So I think we're going to see a lot of different formations here, especially in preseason. I think we're going to see a lot of guys moving around, shifting around, trying to see where they're comfortable with. I think it's great. Val got that 10 work. He's somebody who I would keep my eye on in regard to potentially getting, somebody who you could see with the first team getting some minutes.
Yeah. We did get Jimmy subbing in for the final 11 minutes for Chris Garcia. So we did have our second round draft pick get some minutes last night as well. One last question for you before we move on. According to the Philadelphia blog, Austin got a yellow card in the final 5 minutes of this one. Who is your guess? Here's the field players you had. You had Hector, Sal, Julio, Alonso, Johan, Danny, Val, Emmy, Garcia, or it was Jimmy, and then Hodder Obrion. Who's your guess?
I mean, it seems dumb not to take Danny.
I know. I'll go off the board.
I was going to say Julio.
Sure. He was much better about this last year, but awful in his first year. Could not stay out of the book. Maybe Johan Valencia. I don't know.
Huh?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe getting a little spicy out there at the end.
You could tell how frustrated he was that for his first year with the difference in physicality between the leagues, and he just could not understand it. Like I get that. Like, he was like, what the hell? That's not a foul. So we'll run the odds on that.
DNPs were Jean Kolmich, Leo Väisänen, and Driussi Zardis. More on that in a moment. Cincinnati up on Friday, of course, the defending Supporter Shield champion. So again, like we said on multiple episodes leading up to this week, if you're going to go out to Florida and play two Eastern Conference teams, might as well play the cream of the crop out there. So, So far, I think a productive week for the squad. Anything else for you on the Philadelphia match?
No, sir.
So we did just right before we went live. We actually delayed our recording by about 30 minutes to kind of saddle up, listen to what Coach Wolff had to say in the media availability today from Florida. So let's go through what we had on our thread right now. He reiterated, we have 14 to 15 healthy field players. So again, that was just like that combined with the guys who didn't practice last night. It's like, okay, we're going to get some injury information here in this presser. And we did. Driussi Zardis was out last night due to calf tightness. Josh went on to say the guys competed extremely well last night against Philly from a standpoint of what we want to achieve in preseason. We've worked a good bit on the defensive side and set pieces to really try to instill and build a foundation. And what I take out of all that is, working on the defense and the set pieces, that makes some sense given last year.
Yeah, absolutely. The three guys you mentioned not playing, three guys we're talking about who had injuries, obviously Kolmanic with the ACL, Leo, his injuries that he was dealing with, and then just the scarcity we have at the 9 with Driussi. You got to keep, like you said before we jumped on air, you got to put him in bubble wrap or make him a bubble boy or something. Like, we can't have him, getting busted up in the preseason and going into the season even more shorthanded. So that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at with him, where and we'll talk about, I guess we can just continue going through this. Also, I'll note, if my audio sounded a little funky through the first half hour of this, I just noticed it was coming through my headphones and not my microphone. So change that now. Hopefully it's better. What can you do? We're not going to record a new half hour to start this podcast. Josh also said Leo Väisänen is coming back from an injury. He hasn't been on the field with us. It's good to have Matt Hedges healthy and Julio in there working together. He also added that Antonio Gomez was a player that came recommended by both assistant coach Terry Boss as well as Bryant Farkaloon, who competed against Gomez in the WAC last year. So I did find that a little interesting. Like, we're not getting players off message boards anymore, but we're getting some recommendations from our guys on who could come in and help. And then talking about Danny. So I guess before we get into this, anything you wanted to talk about with what I just talked about, Leo injury? We'll get more talk on that later. But Antonio Gomez, recommended by our new draft pick.
Look, I hope you get the referral bonus. I don't know how long he has to last at the company, but hopefully you get that. With Leo, he suffered some sort of injury in the European tournaments, right?
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I think they're being extra cautious with him because he was dinged up from that. And I remember us discussing, like, the main thing we were concerned with was just him, being healthy.
Yeah.
So again, all that stuff seems precautionary to me. Obviously, you got to slowly introduce Zani back into, full game speed, full game reps, all that kind of stuff. So I'm totally fine with being cautious with those dudes, and I would foresee that being the standard operating procedure going forward throughout this preseason.
Some very interesting comments on Danny Pereira here from Coach. He was just kind of asked about Danny's progression. Obviously, Danny scoring the lone goal last night was a topic of conversation. So Josh had this to say. He said, it's a big year for him, a very important year. You don't get anything in this league. You have to come in and earn it. I think Danny's growth over 3 years has been pretty impressive, but there's still room for growth. The maturity has got to come along. He's emotional, so it's a matter of how he can utilize his emotions in a good way, in training as much as it is in the games. Down the stretch last year, we started utilizing a couple different players because some of that started to fall the wrong way. He has such a bright future if he wants it. But it's not going to just happen. He has to drive that, and we have to nurture him and continue to help him grow. It's an extremely important year for Danny, and his performance last night was quite good. We played him in a little bit of a different position, trying to utilize some different things. That's why preseason is important, while also keeping in mind what we're trying to build for the long term. So I guess going back to the emotions part, I don't know, man. I recall somebody on this podcast, it wasn't me, talking a lot about Danny and his emotions and how that was becoming a big hurdle for him.
Yep. And I mean, all the writing was on the wall with it in regard to how teams were playing him and to how teams were getting under his skin consistently. And then he would make an error. I'm not going to rehash it too much, but he completely fucked us in Dallas. It was unacceptable. And that was really the changing of the tide there, where it was like, okay, we're going to give you some bench time. And Danny's 23. I think about the dumb shit that I was doing, the stupid, things I would say when I was 23 years old. And
about the dumb shit we do and say still.
For sure. And it's a good thing we're not under the microscope.
Yeah.
But, with Danny, all the potential in the world is there. The skill is there. Everyone really, he seems like a great person, a great kid. And he just loves what he loves playing soccer. That's why we called him out on the fucking playing with, guys who work at Jimmy John's in the middle of the season, So all of this stuff, he's not going to learn that stuff. You could learn it, just kind of based off, taking other people's advice. Being like, hey, man, you got to reel this in. But you don't really learn it until it's hammered home and you're sitting on the bench and it's like, okay, my actions are having a negative impact on this team right now, despite all of the good things I'm doing, and that's a hard thing to kind of balance, where it's like, obviously he's one of our best players. He's one of our most skilled players, but we need him to be locked in mentally. And part of that is letting the rest, letting stuff, not taking those terrible fouls. Not putting yourself in a position where you're already on a yellow and then going and doing committing a foul that is just not necessary. So I think everything Coach said there is great. It is coming from a place of, we want you to really succeed. We want you to be really good. Here's where we are identifying how you can take that next step. And if Danny embraces that, I think you're going to see a huge season from him coming up, because once he gets that stuff under wrap, that's just going to elevate his game to a new level. And, my dad was a coach. He coached soccer at the collegiate level. He coached basketball at the high school and collegiate level. He's coached teams that are, group homes for young men who were in prison that have been released, and now they're trying to figure out their lives and everything. So he had a lot of experience working with people who had a hard time controlling their emotions in the moment. And one thing, he always preached and talked about was transferring negative emotion into positive stuff and like using that fuel that he clearly has inside of him. He wants to fucking win, and he's going to do whatever it takes to do that. And if you can make that translation from, all right, this is no longer a detriment to now I have made this an asset for myself where I can control my emotions and then be the player that I want to be, like that is a huge step, a huge growth opportunity. And still, he's 23. He's got plenty of years to learn that. Now, does that necessarily mean he's going to be able to learn it with our club and we'll be able to reap the benefits from that? I'm not sure. But in terms of his individual growth, which we're all committed to, I think every Austin FC fan understands his potential and like that he could move on. He has European aspirations. We've talked about it before. That can also be a positive for us for selling or for loaning, whatever it may be. So everyone is coming from a place of like love with Danny, in my opinion, where it's like we are trying to bring the best out of you. And when he embraces that and makes that next step, which I think he can, it's going to be scary, man. And the other thing that stuck out to me, obviously, and kind of hinted at it before, was the mention of him, playing a different position. Again, we're thin, but we have the depth necessary to where we can move guys around, shuffle guys around, and then have our 11 best players out there as consistently as possible. And Danny can really unlock a lot of that because we know the limitations offensively that Alex has. We know the limitations offensively that Johan has. Owen obviously can also play a variety of positions. So you get these two younger guys kind of moving around the field, understanding different positions, and now you have those two stalwarts in the back who provide that reliability, that toughness that we need. You can get creative, and like even 10 can play at the 9. It's not the most ideal situation. But again, if you're looking to get the most amount of talent out there on the pitch, that's an option. So I'm all for it. I think what Coach said was wonderful. And it would have been nice to hear from Danny a little bit more about that stuff, but I think that'll come down the road, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I mean, clearly they are in communication with him in their, one-on-ones with the coaching staff, things like that. Like they're focusing on that side of his game, and that's something we've been, especially you, right, have been calling for. Since before the Dallas match last year. Like it was Absolutely. It's not like it just reared its head for the first time then.
And I mean,
go ahead.
I think that a guy like Roto, right? Like let's not overlook the instability that was in the management and in the coaching staff throughout the course of that season, and how that impacts a guy who's 22 years old at the time. So now you have Roto at the helm, somebody who has the track record of a handful of people throughout the course of time. You know what I mean? Like this is a guy that like, we don't need to get into his credentials anymore, but like, I think that, voice in Danny's camp and in his ear and being like, hey man, like we can take you to the next level, baby. Like let's go get this, and I think that's going to be really good for him. And I'm excited to see them with a full off season together and working towards this collective goal that we have.
Yeah. I was out last Saturday at the pitch watching some of the academy teams take on FC Dallas, and it just so happened that there was an FC2 workout going on and then the first team practice. So I had a couple vantage points over there. And we know that in the one thing we didn't talk about, that press availability from last week, is Josh talking about, once again, how involved Roto is, whether it's in the coaches' meetings, out at practice, what have you. He was out at practice. So like, again, the fact that Burrell is involved to that level it can only be a positive thing in my eyes. And as far as Danny's positionality, like to your point, being able to move guys around, if they're successful in these quote unquote different positions, right, outside of what we have come to expect them to do, it's only a positive. We can get the most talent out there on the field, especially when you're as thin as this roster is right now. So just kind of finishing up the last few things that Josh talked about. Of course, there's questions about, hey, Driussi is the only striker on the first team roster right now, true striker, right? And so Josh said, and this was a question about a new striker and then potential acclimation time, which of course is a gripe of ours and a lot of Austin FC fans when we get some new guys in. And Wolff said, I don't think there's a set time. The onboarding process comes in a lot of ways. Whoever we get, if we get one, and there's certainly a chance we don't get one, we want a striker that can score goals. So their job doesn't change. There's certain elements that we utilize our striker in, our run of play, defending, and set pieces. So those are the things that become a bit more detail oriented. And then he added, right now, there's no plans to bring in a striker, at least in the near future. So none of that surprises me outside of the end part, but I don't think we should, it's just my opinion on it. I don't think we should read too much into that. Like, we're not getting at the bare minimum, I guess I should say. I think you're getting a vet minimum, probably supplemental guy coming in before the season starts, just to have that body like a Will Bruin. Not saying it's going to be Will. Just because, like, it feels like to me that Josh is just noping out on personnel questions. He has his safety blanket like Linus there in Roto, and you ask him a personnel question, he's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's not my department anymore, because he doesn't want any part of that. No, he hated that.
Yeah, and he shouldn't have been in that fucking
position. We hated it too.
Yeah, like it was ridiculous. And look, we don't need to make some sort of giant, big splash, huge signing at the 9, in my opinion, right? Like, you look at who we had there. Yes, like you look at who we had there last year, right? Like, it's not going to be difficult to get a Maxi Urruti upgrade. Like,
for sure,
you get a guy who can
at least for that price.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. Like, you're not like, while we may have to be looking at some guys who are again, like you said, vet minimum guys, been around the league. Like, it is not a thing where it's like, holy shit, we're dropping off a cliff if we don't get some sort of 9. Like, we understood the production where we had last year, and I think things have kind of gotten lost in translation in regard to Driussi, in my opinion. Like, if you had to make a short list of players who played well for us last year, he's on that list.
He's probably 5th or 6th at worst, right?
He's 100% on that list. Like, he dealt with some injuries. The expectation might have been a little too high, but that's not his fucking fault. Like, so the production that we need to get out of a 9 is not this massive signing, got to go get a top tier kind of guy. And like I said, you can still put Emmy in there. You can still put Seb on there in a pinch, whatever you need to do. So if we bring in a vet minimum guy, like, there's plenty floating around too. I know that, it wouldn't be something to get overly excited about, but again, Josh talked about it as well in that little presser there. We believe in this core that we have.
Yeah.
We believe if this core can stay healthy, that we are going to be a formidable opponent. And I kind of like that we're flying under the radar. I kind of like that people are sleeping on us. And again, that feeds into that hunger, that drive that this team is showing in the beginning of this preseason here. So again, I think that what you said with Josh is spot on. Like, I'm not going to set an expectation for the fan base where it's like, oh, we're definitely getting somebody, because then like it spirals out of control. So I don't know if it's coming. I think that's a very appropriate answer.
Yeah, some more here on John's recovery, injury maintenance, some more injury timeline type of stuff here on John. And this, I think, was something that I skimmed Phil's article, so I apologize, sir. I'll go and read that, more to completion after we finish recording here. But this was something that really stood out. If we're reading this correctly, this is on Zahn's recovery. He says, he's been a beast. I've talked to many players who have suffered that injury twice. He's exactly where I'd expect him to be. Mentally, he's in a good space. Physically, he's extremely strong. He's getting the last bits and pieces of the time that he needs. He's done 11s with us back home. Did see him in the 11-on-11 scrimmage. So that was I was a little surprised that maybe he didn't get some time last night, but clearly only cleared for that more controlled environment, right? He said he won't play down here, but he's close. He's about 10 months out since the injury to be cleared. Added that part myself. That's where our doctors feel most confident for him. So sounds like February is the timeline. But let me back up. Suffered the injury twice?
Yeah.
This is his second ACL injury. I don't know if that was reported last year.
I don't know where. I've never heard it. I looked up his Wikipedia. I tried to find like some sort of information on when he did it before that. But yeah, that's never a great thing when you have 2 of them. Yeah.
And then, questions, of course, coming this preseason about the injuries last year. How do we improve that this year? With the injury maintenance, he said, we're in constant communication with Dave Tenney. We had a rash of injuries last year, We have to do our best to avoid that. We know if we can stay healthy, we have a very solid core. And then talking more about the injury timelines, he said, we'll get Leo back, hopefully in the near future. So very, very vague about Väisänen. He says, Jean will be eligible to play once we get to Palm Springs. So those Coachella matches, we should see some Kolmanic there. And then he said, Driussi hopefully overcomes a bit of his calf tightness. Until we get a full roster, we won't totally know where we are at. Again, I just read this like Driussi like probably did have some calf tightness, but like if that game's counting, he's playing. That's just how I read it. Like we have one striker right now.
Yeah,
we cannot like. There's no need, especially with his age. MLS veteran. There's no need. He doesn't need that full run out like some of these other guys do. And so to me, that's why you're seeing Rigoni at the 9 for 45 minutes, Pignot at the 9 for 45 minutes, and no Driussi. I imagine we see him pop up at the latest, probably against Louisville at home, maybe for a half hour, 45 minutes. We'll see. But I personally am not worried about that.
Dude's a professional. He's a vet. He doesn't need the preseason reps per se. Like obviously you want to get the rust off and everything, but right now the most important thing is health. And injuries, there's a large part of randomness. The variable of just random shit happening out there when you're playing and dealing with that many plays. You have to think that regresses to the mean for us this upcoming season.
Yeah. Well, we'll see, man. Again, it's the first. Last night was the first of 6 preseason matches. There is plenty of time for these guys to continue gelling together, not just in practice, but in these exhibitions. Of course, there's more questions about the FC2 guys. Potentially getting some first team time or a contract leading up to the season. And Coach answered this pretty much how I think you and I have been treating it, and how we expected. He said there's still a significant jump from ATX2 to the first team. That's quite clear. But the more these guys can live in this space, the better they'll feel about it. And we will keep our expectations in line. So, again, I still think there are a number of these guys that could earn a supplemental spot. Val comes to mind first. I think for the fullback depth, Sheikh Touré could make some sense. But I still think that I don't think any of these guys are more than 50% likely to earn a first team deal by the time the season starts. I don't think anybody is what you would classify as likely to do that.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
We also heard Austin FC2 first official practice back with Coach Utley will be February 5th. So that's when we'll get our answer on some guys like Joe Hafferty and Bobasi, right? We were going through our contract spreadsheet. Yeah, I don't think we're getting Bobasi back, man, unless we get another loan. We'd have to pay a transfer fee for that. So
that one hurts.
Yeah, love that kid.
Love me some Bobo.
And then our buddy Phil did ask kind of about the lack of field players, the overload at goalkeeper, and the rumored loan of Damian Lass. And Josh gave him a pretty hearty chuckle there. Like he was laughing. And he said, it's a little heavy with the goalies at the moment. And he said, Damian has done a great job. We saw what it looked like last year for him. And he said, obviously, Steph played last night. I thought he did a good job, as did Brad. There's good competition there. I certainly don't rule out Damian playing, indicating this Friday. But the starting point is he probably won't play in that game. So to me, that sounds like the last loan is imminent and potentially over on that Louisville sideline/net in a week and a half here. So
that'd be fun.
Pretty much, that's pretty much all the takeaways from today's media availability with Wolff. There was also Johnny G and Johan Valencia, but I didn't have time to go through those. So, and I imagine, maybe a little bit less in terms of tangible insights, or even crumbs to come out of that. So,
they briefly talked about Kolmanic with Johnny, and then if he might be a captain, he's like, I don't expect that, and he kind of echoed Josh's sentiments about we have a lot of great leaders on this team, and it'll get figured out. Yeah.
Well, Cincy on Friday, so we'll be looking out for that. Time still to be announced in terms of the kickoff. If I had to guess, probably 5:30 Central again. Just kind of same thing there, but we'll see. We'll keep our eyes on that. the LA Galaxy announced that they will stream all of their preseason matches from the Coachella Invitational. So
Nice.
Super Bowl Sunday, noon Central. There's your Super Bowl warm-up is Austin FC versus LA Galaxy in the preseason. We'll certainly be tuned in to that stream. Two other pieces of ex-player news here. First one, Maxi Ruti did find a new home with Platense down in South America. So congrats to him going back home there, finding a new team to continue his career with. We, of course, wish him well. And then Alexander Radovanovic, who it's been so long, I think, since you thought about him. I brought his name up and you were like, who?
Yeah.
And then I said, Rado. You're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Rado was loaned from, and again, never thought I would have to say this team's name again, Kortrijk, his team in the Belgian First Division. Mm-hmm. He was loaned from there to Almeria in La Liga. And so, of course, that brought out some Austin FC fans on the socials talking about, oh, well, he's good enough for La Liga, but we couldn't use him or purchase him or what have you. And like, if we remember back, he wasn't staying regardless because his wife wanted to go back home. So they were out of here. But I also think it is notable where his teams are at. Both Kortrijk, last place out of 16 teams in the Belgian First Division, and his new side in La Liga is basically prepping for La Liga too, because Almeria is more than halfway through their La Liga season. How many wins do you think they have? Over under 1.5.
I'll take the under.
Yeah, it's not 1, it's 0. And it's La Liga fans might be, pointing to last weekend where there was maybe some questionable officiating. If we were on the Almeria side, we would have been pissed, but they remain winless. So, good for Rado finding a new home. Hopefully they can get a win or two before them dudes are getting relegated. And hopefully he does well in La Liga too next year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got time out of him. He got hurt, he
was hurt.
He fucked up his shoulder, and it's like he made an impact on a lot of people because he played really hard, and people can appreciate that, And look, I like our center back depth right now much more without him on it and who we have. Yeah.
Well, shit, I would still take him. If we could add him as our fourth center back right now, I would absolutely take him. He was on almost 650, I think. So not on that contract, but all right. So a little bit of last business day here, before we close it out with the MLS news. Austin FC 2 announcing that they have signed academy product Irvin Torres, which, you just love to see, right? Ooh. Irvin, 16-year-old midfielder, was with Austin FC 2 on an amateur agreement last season that was signed in March of 23. He only made 3 appearances during the season. He was busy tearing up the U17 ranks. He was so good with the U17 team that he was named to the 2023 MLS Next All-Star game following the next playoffs and showcase. Torres has also made 6 appearances with the U16 U.S. Youth Men's National Team, 4 starts in those 6 appearances. He does have 1 goal. The terms, or I should say the length of this contract, was not released, so that is still a question mark. But again, taking the next step on his pathway to hopefully one of those supplemental homegrown deals that we just saw Micah Burton get. And for the little bit I have watched of Irvin Torres, I'm excited about that he is, sticking with this club at the FC2 level. And I'm excited to see a lot more of him at that level this season.
I agree. How old is he again?
16
right now. Yeah. So that's awesome. Statesman did an article on Micah.
I saw that.
You did? That. Nice. Yeah. Look, this is Roto has hinted at wanting to do stuff like this. Make sure we have homegrown rights, build up, a nice funnel system, whatever, reverse funnel to get him to the, to the big leagues and everything. And I'm super happy for the kid. It's awesome. Yeah. What an accomplishment. 16 years old, signed a pro contract, just fucking super cool.
Hopefully the first of many here in Austin. The team also released their preseason schedule for 2024. So first practice the 5th, first preseason exhibition the 10th, welcoming Houston Christian University to town. Then on the 17th, the next Saturday, taking on our old Hilltoppers of St. Edwards coming up to the pitch. So we might, I know it's closed to the public. We might, you're the goat there, we might have to sneak up to the hill to catch the Toppers versus FCto. And I gotta be honest, man, I'm torn there. Like, I'm a St. Ed's fan too. So the rest of the schedule: NYCFC 2, North Texas SC, which is of course FC Dallas's next pro affiliate. Then the one road match in this preseason, Saturday, March 2nd, FC 2 taking on San Antonio FC on the road. I mean, how much shit do we get to talk if our second team beats San Antonio now? Like that, they can. We joked about the children avenging us multiple times last year with the championship. This is the ultimate avengement, right? If you go down there and you take care of San Antonio, we'll be looking out for that one. They close it out on March 9th against Richland back here at home. So you would think maybe that next weekend, maybe the 16th is our first match day for FC2 this year. Anything else for you here on the preseason schedule?
Oh man, that would be great. We need that versus San Antonio FC. We'll go see those fans we met in the parking lot. Those nice guys.
Yes, we will. Like I said, got to go see some of the academy teams play, specifically the 15s and the 17s. The entire academy was taking on FC Dallas last Saturday. And man, heartbreaker for the U17s. It was a great game, physical game. Took the loss literally at the death, 3-2. It was actually, man, I think those guys have to credit FC Dallas for this goal that they scored. Like, it was off of a turnover in our defensive third, but the build up off that turnover was just like, if it wasn't against my soccer religion, I would have stood up and clapped for how pretty that goal was. So like, sometimes you got to credit the offense. The U15s though, get revenge, 2-1 win. And the one goal that I saw, I had to leave at halftime, but absolute screamer from the top of the box on a free kick, like maybe 7 or 8 yards outside, left center and net. Found the top bin. I believe that was number 34. We don't have like numbers to players, but I could recognize some of the U17s from watching all the GA Cup last year, and of course Joe Arena just looking like Claudio out there, same little bop with his hair, like trotting around out there. Did see Claudio in the stands all bundled up. It was cold as shit out there. U14's got a draw, 1-1. So decent day against a high-level academy. There was a kid with the U15s for Dallas who was wearing number 7 who was really talented. Like maybe a kid we know his name in a couple years. Nice. And the one crumb to come out of this day from Palmer Field, we got a scoreboard, official scoreboard out there. It wasn't on for the academy, but it'll be nice for FCto matches this coming season.
It will. Very nice.
All right, let's close it out as we do in the preseason with a quick spin through all the MLS news of the week. First, this was last week, but Divock Origi has been offered to multiple MLS clubs, and at least Dallas refused. So interesting developments there. I got to admit, I haven't followed much of Origi since he was with Liverpool, but clearly not having the best time over there in Europe. But shit, I'd take him on Austin.
Shit, I mean, well, Dallas got a pretty good one up there, so.
Yeah, true. Other names there, Albert Ellis, who used to be with Houston, Jesse Lingard, and then Olivier Giroud were also mentioned as potential guys coming over to MLS, whether in this window or in the summer. I'd take an aging Giroud. And aging maybe is putting it lightly, but still, that guy can score goals in MLS. We serve him some of those crosses. Yes. Dallas pursuing Croatian international forward Peter Musa from Benfica. So maybe that's why they're turning down Origi, because they've got some high-profile targets here up front to pair with Jesus Ferreira. And, of course, no Velasco this season either. The Galaxy, stop this shit, man. In talks to acquire Croatian youth international winger Gabriel Rukavina. He would be a U22 signing. That would be their third, I believe, high-profile winger signing of the offseason. And I can feel the GAM slipping through our fingers.
It seems intentional.
Yeah. I mean, like, Diego will still play plenty of minutes. He'll get starts. He'll be, I would imagine, the first sub in a lot of instances, but I still don't like to see it.
And we don't know the
we don't know the triggers. Yeah.
So, I mean, like, look, like they've made moves. You know what I mean? They were a very bad team last year. They're still got some dysfunction to deal with. I know the fan base is not, that wound hasn't particularly healed by any stretch of the imagination. So them not wanting to shell out some GAM to get Diego minutes, makes sense from a business standpoint. Obviously, It's not great for us, but knock that shit off.
Yep. FC Cincinnati finalizing a deal to sign Czech midfielder Pavel Buka. He's a 25-year-old box-to-box midfielder is how he's described, and he has featured in the Champions League recently. So looks like the rich maybe getting a little bit richer there. Pair him with Mobodo in the midfield. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Ours is coming.
Ours is coming.
Absolutely. And I guess to interject some more Austin FC talk just to close out the Verde verbiage here on episode 115, I am totally fine being patient through all of this, because the worst thing you can do in a rebuild is go out there, we got space, we got to fill it up with these contracts. And if that shit, we got to make sure that we do this the right way, do it responsibly. And it just seems like Roto is doing that.
I agree. Otherwise, you would have seen some 9 in here
already,
who we paid more than we should have for just to fill out this roster and appease some of the fan base here. Yeah. But this is the strategy. So our guys are coming for sure.
Yep. Next winter window. That's when we expect to be like, okay, now we're
not going to hamstring ourselves with some bad contracts that are expiring in 2027. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when there's a bunch of contracts coming up this winter. Montreal finalizing a deal to sign Uruguayan forward Matias Cocaro. Sure. He's a 26-year-old, but I mean, some real numbers here since the summer of 22. So last year and a half, 31 goals, 7 assists. So high caliber forward coming in there from Montreal. Big signing. Bit of a bummer here for Inter Miami. Facundo Farias tears his ACL. Of course, we'll miss all of 2024. So look, it's beginning for you, Inter Miami. You can't just do all this. Yeah, you can't just do all this and expect the soccer gods. Yep. But that sucks. Farias, a really exciting young player. So hopefully, recovers fully. And this is not good news.
Good.
What's that?
I said, I wonder if they'll still be good.
Yeah. This is not great news for us, but, it was probably coming regardless. Emmanuel Reynoso has reported to Loon's camp, so we should expect to see him a month from today. The Union, not the Philadelphia Union, the union representing the MLS officials, has unanimously voted to strike if there's no new agreement a week from today on January 31st. Bogert said one of his sources puts it at, quote, 99%. So, we're prepping for some replacement refs here, but man, I know we talked about this a little bit last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever that was. I feel like the league really has an interest in getting something done by the time RSL and Inter Miami kick off on February 21st, because how many eyes are going to be on Messi's team with Suarez in there now on a standalone game on a Wednesday night to open up the season? And if you're coming out there with some just bum refs, that's just going to be a terrible look. So I guess I'm just hopeful that something gets worked out there and these officials get compensated fairly to where they come back and are ready to work.
I mean, we don't know the inner workings of it for sure, what they're asking for, what they're currently at, but it is just a bad look for a league that wants to gain legitimacy throughout the world. And, you have the greatest soccer player of all time in our league actively playing. And it's a shame. It would be embarrassing to have some amateur ref out there refereeing that game. It's a terrible look, and I hope it gets rectified. And 99%. So you're telling me there's a chance, Bogert?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Two more things. Just today, LAFC terminated the loan of Philip Krastev, so opening an international and senior roster spot for them. He was just 22, so I kind of was under the impression he might have been a U22. Not so, but still opening up an international spot. LAFC also traded for 2 international slots from Seattle last week, so they're going to, again, like we said, they'll reload.
Yep.
And the last one to talk about, this makes this style of nepotism makes Owen look like he's not even related to Josh. Okay. Harvey Neville is on trial with Portland. Phil Neville, the new coach. Harvey Neville is under contract with Inter Miami.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know how that works, but that is apparently what's happening right now up there in Portland. So they would literally have to make a deal with Miami because Miami ain't using their buyout on that kid. So they might have to give up some gam if they're trying to sign the coach's son there. And like Harvey Neville has never caught on anywhere he's been, and it's kind of been following his dad. So I don't know, man. That if I was a fan of Portland, I would be raising my eyebrows at that for sure.
God, I mean, obviously we don't know if there's any sort of return, like what it could be, but just man.
If it's if it's 25K gam, it's like, yeah, I don't want to do that.
Miami can move that, like, yeah, that'd be shitty.
Well, anything else for you before we wrap up episode 115?
Nope, we inch closer every day.
Yep, month out as of today. Appreciate everybody tuning in, sticking with us here in episode 115 of the North End Podcast. If you've got 5 seconds to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get your podcast, we would greatly appreciate it. And of course, with the season approaching, make sure you mention the North End Podcast to all of your Austin FC friends. Help us grow the podcast in that manner. We would greatly appreciate it. And if you're watching on the YouTube channel, of course, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell to know when a live stream pops up or a new episode goes live. And of course, on this episode, hit that thumbs up, like the video. Help us battle the YouTube algorithm overlords. Atone for your sins. Wash yourselves clean in the crumbs of the North End. We will be back next Wednesday, recapping Austin FC's preseason exhibition against FC Cincinnati, talking about all of the other Austin FC news between now and then, and of course, a little wrap up with the MLS news as well. We appreciate you sticking with us here and listening as always. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see everybody back here next Wednesday. Until then, he's E, and I'm Zach. Vamos Austin FC, everybody. Goodbye.